He was the man every director wanted, the man every woman adored, a golden face carved into the Hollywood Mount Olympus, Brad Pitt. The name alone once sent ripples through the world. But behind the charm, behind the awards, the perfect cheekbones and the multi-million-dollar smile, there's a man who's been quietly unraveling. Today, at 61, Brad Pitt is not the man you think he is. The tragedy isn't in what he lost. It's in what he never truly had. Peace, identity, and unconditional love. This is not a tabloid story. This is the true cost of becoming Hollywood's golden boy, and the heartbreak that followed. Before he was a global icon, before the heartbreaks and betrayals, he was just a kid from Missouri. William Bradley Pitt, raised in a conservative religious household. His father ran a trucking company, his mother a school counselor. On paper, everything was ordinary. But Brad, he was never meant for the ordinary. He moved to Los Angeles in the late 80s with just $325 in his pocket and a dream that refused to die. Within weeks, he was background dressing for movies and driving strippers to bachelor parties just to stay afloat. But then came Thelma and Louise, and everything changed. That 6-minute scene launched a myth. Hollywood had its new sex symbol, but what no one saw was how quickly the myth swallowed the man. From Legends of the Fall to Seven, Brad became the fantasy everyone projected onto, and the human nobody really knew. Every magazine labeled him the most beautiful man alive. But inside, he later admitted he felt numb, disassociated, as if the whole world had fallen in love with a mask he didn't even recognize. When Brad met Jennifer Aniston in 1998, it felt like a cosmic alignment. She was America's sweetheart. He was Hollywood royalty. Their wedding, a Malibu spectacle, was guarded by private helicopters and cost over $1 million. The press called them the golden couple. Together, they represented perfection, but behind the polished smiles was something far more complex. In interviews, Jen once said, "He's not just a pretty face. He's deep, quiet. He thinks about the world in ways people don't see." And she was right. Brad was never comfortable being the fantasy. He wanted substance, to act in films that meant something, to have a family, to explore his own identity. But by the early 2000s, that quiet dissatisfaction started to grow louder. The tabloids didn't see it coming, but Brad did. He once told an interviewer, "I was sitting on a couch, holding a joint, hiding from the world, and I realized I wasn't living. I was just trying to keep up the illusion." Brad and Jen were the dream, but dreams, he would learn, are fragile. By 2004, the mask was slipping. He was tired of the cameras, the constant obsession, and the artificiality of fame. Troy was supposed to be his biggest role yet. He trained for months, transformed his body, but the reception was lukewarm. Critics called it soulless, and Brad took it personally. He started asking dangerous questions. Is this all there is? What happens when the spotlight fades? In his own words, fame is a monster. It eats everything, even you. He longed for something real, something raw. And then, Angelina Jolie walked into his life. On the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Brad saw a woman who lived freely, fiercely, unapologetically, everything he felt he wasn't allowed to be. Up next, the affair that shattered Hollywood's most beloved couple and plunged Brad into a tragedy no one saw coming. It was supposed to be just another blockbuster. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, two stars playing married assassins. But what unfolded behind the scenes was something much more explosive than anything the script offered. Brad was still married to Jennifer Aniston, but there was a fire building, one he could no longer hide. The chemistry between Brad and Angelina wasn't just acting, it was raw, uncontainable, and soon, undeniable. The rumors started slowly, whispers on set, paparazzi spotting them laughing a little too freely. And then, the bombshell. Jennifer, and Brad announced their separation in January 2005. Within months, Brad was photographed vacationing with Angelina and her adopted son Maddox on a beach in Africa. The world turned on him. Jennifer's fans painted him as a traitor. Angelina became the homewrecker. And Brad? He stayed silent. Publicly, he never spoke ill of Jennifer. Privately, friends say he was in turmoil. He once confessed to a friend, "I didn't leave because I didn't love Jen. I left because I couldn't breathe anymore." In Angelina, Brad didn't just find a lover. He found a new version of himself, one that didn't have to wear the golden mask. But the cost of that reinvention was about to spiral out of control. From 2005 to 2015, Brad and Angelina created something that felt more like a movement than a relationship. They adopted children from Cambodia, Ethiopia, and Vietnam. They had 3 biological children together. They became a symbol of global citizenship, taking humanitarian trips, speaking at the UN, donating millions. To the world, they were perfect, a multicultural, philanthropic supercouple. But behind the camera flashes, cracks were beginning to show. Brad was struggling. The weight of fatherhood, career pressure, and media obsession were pressing down on him. He began drinking more. Friends say he started losing himself, not in the fame but in the noise. The chaos of always being watched, of being held to impossible standards. He loved his children, but the constant movement, the lack of structure, it wore on him. Angelina, known for her intensity, began taking control of the family's direction. Schooling, careers, travel, even security. Brad, used to being the center of gravity, felt himself orbiting someone else's world. Brad told GQ years later, "I wanted to be better. I just didn't know how." What began as a fairy tale family was now becoming a battlefield of egos, expectations, and emotional exhaustion. September 20th, 2016. The headlines were seismic. Angelina Jolie files for divorce. The reasons? Cited as irreconcilable differences. But the real story was much darker. Days before, an incident had occurred aboard a private jet. Allegedly, Brad and Maddox, his eldest adopted son, had gotten into a heated altercation. Someone reported it. The FBI opened an investigation. Child Protective Services was called. Brad Pitt, once the world's ideal father, was now being investigated for child abuse. Brad denied hitting his son, but he admitted he had lost control. He later told GQ, "I was boozing too much. It became a problem. I couldn't remember a day without drinking or smoking." The investigation was eventually closed with no charges, but the damage was irreversible. Brad didn't see his children for weeks. Custody turned into a Cold War, fought in courtrooms, sealed documents, and press leaks. The man who once had it all, the wife, the kids, the empire, was now living alone in an empty house in Los Feliz, sculpting clay just to quiet his thoughts. Hollywood knew him as the golden boy, but behind closed doors, Brad Pitt was living in pieces. By 2017, Brad Pitt was no longer a leading man in the tabloids. He was a broken man in real life. The divorce had gutted him. The custody battle consumed him. And behind it all was something even darker. A long, hidden battle with alcohol. In that haunting GQ interview, Brad finally opened up. "I stopped everything except boozing when I started my family. I couldn't remember a day since college I hadn't had a drink." The world had seen him play drunks, addicts, and broken men on screen. But now art and life had finally collided, and the man playing the role of Brad Pitt could no longer keep it together. The rage, the sadness, the denial, it all came crashing down after that fateful jet incident. He admitted, "I was abusing myself more than anyone." Brad checked himself into therapy, gave up alcohol, rebuilt his life brick by brick. It wasn't glamorous, there were no headlines, just silence and shame. He took up sculpting, learned to sit with discomfort, spoke less, cried more. For the first time in decades, he stopped acting and started healing. But sobriety couldn't fix everything. especially the distance between Brad and his children, particularly Maddox and Pax, the two sons adopted by Brangelina before Brad entered the picture. After the divorce, reports surfaced that Maddox no longer considered Brad his father. That Pax felt abandoned. Brangelina was granted primary custody. Brad got limited, monitored visits. It was a slow, painful unraveling of the thing he valued most, his family. One source close to the actor said, "Brad walks around that empty house with 6 bedrooms and not a single voice in them." He tried writing letters, sending gifts, hoping time would heal wounds. But the silence on the other end only deepened his guilt. Being a father was supposed to be Brad's redemption arc, the role that gave his life meaning, but now even that was fading, and no Oscar could bring it back. In 2020, Brad Pitt won his first acting Oscar, Best Supporting Actor, for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It was a full-circle moment. Applause thundered across the Dolby Theater. He smiled. He joked. He held the gold statue like a champion. But after the laughter, after the cameras stopped flashing, Brad walked off stage alone. There was no Brangelina, no Jennifer, no kids in the audience, just an aging actor standing in the wings of his own legacy. In private, friends say Brad rarely goes out. He spends most of his time at his art studio or home, working on sculptures no one sees, listening to Frank Ocean, reading philosophy, waiting for the day the pain fades. He is still admired, still powerful, but profoundly alone. As one journalist put it, Brad Pitt is the most famous man we've never really known. In the silence after the storm, Brad Pitt began searching for something he never truly had: peace. He stopped chasing scripts, stopped attending every premiere. He started meditating, going to therapy weekly, and most unexpectedly, he started sculpting, not as a hobby, but as a necessity. He once said, "I needed a place where I could cry, where I could bleed and not be judged for it." That place was sculpture. In 2022, he revealed an exhibit in Finland, not in Hollywood, not in New York, but far away, quietly, anonymously, because this wasn't about fame anymore. It was about healing. Brad Pitt is no longer running from his pain. He walks with it now, a quiet companion instead of a ghost. But healing isn't the same as forgetting. Some things never truly leave you. They just learn to sit quieter in your soul. In recent years, his name has been linked to several women, artists, models, even a jewelry designer. But none of them last. None of them stick. Because the truth is, Brad Pitt never stopped loving the women he lost. He once called Jennifer Aniston a ray of light in a dark room. And when they briefly reunited at the SAG Awards in 2020, the world held its breath. Their backstage photo broke the internet. But it wasn't a reunion, just a memory. And Brangelina, that story's more complicated. She gave him everything: children, purpose, chaos, and took it all away just as quickly. He doesn't speak her name in interviews, but in every pause, every sigh, every carefully chosen word, you can feel her presence. As for the children, they've grown. Maddox is now in college. Sahara has spoken at the UN. Pax reportedly refuses to speak to Brad. The twins? They live mostly with Brangelina. He sees some of them, occasionally, quietly. But the father who once carried 6 children on his back now carries only their silence. Love built Brad Pitt's world. And when it collapsed, it took pieces of him with it that may never return. He's still acting, still producing. His company, Plan B, continues to back meaningful films. He's not chasing blockbusters anymore. He's chasing stories that matter. And maybe, in some small way, still trying to matter himself. His latest roles, haunted astronauts, grieving fathers, lonely stuntmen, aren't accidents. They're mirrors. Each one a little more real, a little more him. He's still here, still standing. But the crowds have thinned. The spotlight doesn't burn as brightly. And in the quiet of his studio or the echo of an empty mansion, Brad Pitt is learning to be okay with being alone. Is this the final curtain? Probably not. But it might be the final transformation. From icon to man, From fantasy to truth. And maybe that's the most heartbreaking part, that it took this much pain just to finally meet himself. Brad Pitt was never just a movie star. He was a mirror of everything we desire and everything we fear. He had it all: fame, fortune, beauty, love. And yet, at 61, his story is not one of success, but of survival. He survived fame, survived heartbreak, survived himself. This isn't a tragedy in the traditional sense. It's not about a fall from grace. It's about a man discovering, far too late, that grace was never out there. It was always in here. If you've ever loved someone and lost them, if you've ever built yourself up just to break apart, maybe you'll understand. Maybe you already do. Like, share, subscribe, and comment below. What do you think is Brad Pitt's real legacy?